For today's film room, we're going to dive into some wide receivers I really like for some film football nerd reasons here in week 17. And I tried to pick three guys that are all, Boone, I'll be honest here. I didn't want to go too crazy deep. I didn't want to be like, oh man, yeah, Josh Downs, they're spreading Jalen Coker. Yeah, no. I want to be a little practical here. I want to try to stick inside the actual top kind of, at least my top 25 ranked players. But I did go sort of by range here in descending order. So the first player I want to highlight is Eagles wide receiver Devontae Smith. And we talked about this game a little bit earlier as potentially a ugly football game, a little bit sloppy. But one thing I wanted to highlight about this Eagles passing game is that when we think about the Eagles, when they have their ceiling type games, it's usually against defenses that play a lot of man coverage. They use that single high safety. Jalen Hurts is able to push the ball to the perimeter of the field. They don't often take the whole shots over the middle against cover two, some of the quarters, structures, things like that. That's not really how this Eagles offense typically has their ceiling games. Well, this Bills defense is basically the antithesis of that. No matter what, they're pretty much playing a lot of zone. They're playing a lot of two high safeties. I believe they play the most two high safeties in the NFL right now. It's either them they're actually a little bit less this year in terms of how often they're using two high safeties. But when they are in two high, they're getting a little bit shredded this year. I believe they're top 5 in points per drop back allowed. So that's been problematic. And again, when you get into those looks, that's not really where A.J. Brown has his big games. And again, I'm not saying bench A.J. Brown or anything like that, but that's when you look at the games that A.J. Brown has had his big performances, it has been against teams that get shredded in those single high situations. That's not this Bills defense. And if you just look at the production in terms of when there's two high safeties on the field, Devontae Smith leads the team in catches. He catches 72% of his passes. So again, I don't know if this is a ceiling game for Devontae Smith, but I really like him to catch a lot of passes in this one. I'd see him getting like 6 to 8 catches kind of as a medium projection in this one.
I hope you're right. It'd be nice to see him get hot here down the final stretch because he's been kind of cold lately, and he's a streaky player, no doubt. Like, he has these bouts, and some of that is just because he's playing on a team. You talked earlier about guys that end up on depth charts behind other players, and he's somebody that has ended up behind a really good receiver, and I think that leads him to be a little more of a streaky fantasy asset. He did find the end zone last week. That was the first time that he scored since week 10, though. He's been held under 50 yards in 4 straight games. Under 10 fantasy points in 4 of his last 6 as well. So we've been in a bit of a slump here for him. But Buffalo also, you look at the Bills, for everything you said about them, they've only let one wide receiver go over 55 yards against them in their last 5 games. You add the weather into the mix. I know you acknowledged it. I don't want to just dump on this completely like the snow might in Buffalo on Sunday, but I don't feel good about this being a ceiling game for anybody in that passing attack. I'm a little bit concerned for him here, but it's good to know that this is a spot where he could potentially actually outperform A.J. Brown in this one against that Bills defense.
Yeah, that's sort of where my mind was at here. It's less about do I think Devontae Smith is going to have this monstrous game? I still have him ranked outside my top 15 wide receivers. And definitely the weather could be something that ruins this prediction entirely. But I think if we remove the weather aspect from it, just structurally Smith, the way he is used in this offense. And I think this is, I don't want to go on a big rant about the coverage data stuff because nobody cares about my thoughts on this. But sometimes I think it's less about, this guy averages this, that, and the other. And I quote those stats sometimes because I think when it helps paint the story, he does this production-wise, yards per out, targets per out against this coverage. Sometimes it really is just, to me, you only need a couple of plays, right, if you're hitting that ceiling. And you just want to think about an offense's structure and which role the receiver plays in there. Sometimes it is just, this type of coverage and this structure, your first read is going to be that X receiver, And so again, typically when we're thinking about these defenses like Buffalo that plays a lot of deep safeties, you're going to get stuff underneath to the slot player in the offense. And over the last, 2 seasons and, since recent history for sure, it's still A.J. Brown, strict perimeter receiver, Devontae Smith is mostly the guy that is playing on the inside there. So that's what kind of led me to think that if I'm picking Eagles receivers this week, I'm still probably going to have A.J. Brown ranked higher because he, without question, has the higher ceiling. He's playing so much better now than he was at the beginning of the year. But I think Devontae Smith is in a pretty good spot here. I'll get to my next one, and this one I feel actually much better about. It's Jalen Waddle here this week. And look, I know it's Quinn Ewers. I get it. To me, Boone, I just didn't really see a big difference in the Dolphins offense with Quinn Ewers under center. I mean, did you find anything compelling to think?
It was a very low bar. It was an easy act to follow for him. Yes, it couldn't get much worse than it looked with Tua. It wasn't great by any means, but I don't know that it was that much worse with Ewers out there. Agreed.
That's what I'm saying here. This wasn't. You could certainly find situations where, oh man, Quinn Ewers was in there, and it's just, well, you kind of wish that it was Tua because he at least keeps the train on the tracks and all that stuff. Whatever. I didn't see that. I think Ewers was at least functional. I thought he, got the job done. He had a couple turnovers. Tua led the NFL in interceptions when he was playing. So just to me, it's like that. There's no big difference there. And I thought Jalen Waddle actually having a functional game here was a good sign. Obviously, usually you get your number one receiver taken away, and there were injury situations there for the Bengals that are worth acknowledging. But regardless, I think Jalen Waddle still having a useful game, not like a crazy big production or anything like that, but a useful game with Quinn Ewers in his first start was a good sign. And then you look at this matchup this week. I mean, as much as we're all, I think, rightfully wringing our hands about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, that defense still has a lot of problems. They do not get pressure. And that, obviously, if you're going to be able to hang back in the pocket and get the ball out to your first read, that first read is going to be Jalen Waddle on a wide variety of these concepts for Miami. And Tampa Bay gives up the second most points per drop back in single high coverage, only second to Washington, who is just getting fried at a whole different level in terms of what they're allowing in single high coverage. And Jalen Waddle this year has been outside on over 80% of his snaps. So I actually think the more I'm looking at it, I like Jalen Waddle actually more than Devontae Smith this week. He's someone I'm going to be pretty high on relative to consensus this week.
I agree with you. I'm glad you made the point that it was just nice to see him have like a usable fantasy day, even though it wasn't a big performance. 5 for 72 is certainly a usable fantasy day, especially when you consider like he's been under 10 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games. So might not be on a lot of playoff rosters, a lot of championship rosters here, but good news for him to be able to continue to produce. And it wasn't like going in the opposite direction. And yeah, that Bucs defense, especially the secondary, they've dealt with some injuries, but we just saw like Tedero McMillan, 73 and a TD against them this week. I think that's totally within the wheelhouse for Jalen Waddle to have a game like that in this one. So yeah, I'm not out on him by any means. And I agree with you that it hasn't been a great year for the Dolphins offense as a whole, especially for that passing attack. And we can blame some injuries. They don't have Tyreek Hill and stuff, but still, Waddle has a chance to finish strong based on the matchup and based on the fact that, yeah, not that much has changed really, no matter who. At least it's not Zach Wilson under center. Hopefully they don't go to him.
I don't think that we have to worry about that. Okay, my last one here is DJ Moore, who we talked about earlier. And I'm assuming here that Luther Burden is not playing in this game when I give out this sort of selection, this advice for this week. And the reason for me, this kind of goes back to the point I was making earlier where, there's been this conversation about what's wrong with DJ Moore, like what's going on with DJ Moore. And I do think there's real criticism to the fact that he just doesn't fit in this offense for a couple different reasons. And maybe the role that he is in is not conducive to getting a lot of targets. And that's the thing, like he hasn't really seen his role, his usage, his, route kind of diet change in the last 2 weeks with Rome Odunze out there. Nothing's really changed about his deployment. He's just getting more opportunities, and the opportunities that he gets because of the role that he plays on this team as the most outside receiver. Like he takes the most snaps outside relative to everyone else in the room. He gets the most kind of deep down the field targets. When those targets hit, they're going to hit big. Like we saw against the Packers this past week, the post route touchdown out of multiple tight end set there. I think we could see that again here against San Francisco, who since week 11 gives up to receivers lined up out wide the 12th most air yards per target. Not a crazy number or anything, but certainly I think Robert Saleh has this defense playing aggressively and playing above its head, but still you can get them on some deeper passes. We obviously saw Alec Pierce last night. What was it? 2 post route looking touchdowns. At least that was what it looked like on the broadcast. A couple post routes. That's exactly how DJ Moore scored his touchdown on Saturday night against the Green Bay Packers. So I feel like DJ Moore, I have him the lowest ranked of this group, but he's going to be right at the top of that wide receiver 3 sort of boom bust range. And if you have him, I think you can risk the boom bust nature of his sort of role in this Bears offense this week.
I feel like we could see another boom week, to be honest. I'm going to have him probably rank the highest of this group, which surprises me. And I'll go back into the lab a little bit, because as I always say, anytime you're making a recommendation, it's going to make me, think about my choice and how I have it projected. But back-to-back top 7 fantasy weeks here. And this matchup with the 49ers just, to me, it's not that scary, right? Like, we saw them be able to get thrown all over. We've seen that this year. They've basically been a defense where you want to throw the ball against them. You want to put the ball in the air. Phillip Rivers was able to do it. I think Caleb Williams will be able to do it. And yeah, I think DJ, and I am assuming that Burton is going to be out as well. Yeah. So that could change as the week goes along. But assuming that he is out, I think DJ Moore is somebody that I'm very excited to play this week, more as like a wide receiver 2 than a wide receiver 3, to be honest. And maybe I'm buying in too much of the recent production, but I think this is another spot, given the matchup, where he could certainly come through with a big performance again.
Well, here's the thing. Like, you should buy into the recent production because, like I said, I still think DJ is a good player. He just doesn't really fit this offense, but the way that they're using him it's always been akin to these big downfield plays. And guess what? He's hit on the big downfield plays lately because he's the only healthy wide receiver. Like, it really is that simple sometimes. Like, what was going on with him in the first part of the season? There were 2 guys who, I think, younger players who were nipping on his heels, and now those guys aren't there. And Olamide Zaccheaus is not going to be that guy. So DJ is going to get the opportunities. I think recalibrating after having this discussion with you, I think that I'd actually probably say that Jalen Waddle's the player I'm going to, I think, rank the highest because I feel just the best about his median case outcome. I think DJ Moore has the highest ceiling. I think Devontae Smith probably doesn't have the ceiling of the other 2 guys, but I actually feel just really good about his floor in this matchup. So sort of you can take those kind of pieces of context, those adjustments, and decide what fits best into your lineups out there.